The plate came back to the kitchen for the third time, and the third waitress came back with it crying. Nora Bishop watched from the service station, a stack of warm bread plates balanced against her forearm, and understood without being told that her quiet Tuesday had just ended. The marchand had a rule that nobody had ever written down. When the man at the corner table sent something back, you did not argue, you did not ask why, and you did not, under any circumstances, let him see your face change. 2 servers had broken that rule this month. Both were gone. The third, a girl named Priya who had lasted 9 days, set the rejected sea bass on the pass with shaking hands and said she was going to be sick. And then she went to be sick, and that left no one between the man in the corner and the floor. Renner, the general manager, found Nora at the station the way a drowning man finds a rope. "You, the quiet one. Table 11, now." She did not say yes. She squared the edge of the bread plate against the lip of the tray until it sat flush, the warm crust rough under her fingertips and the yeasty smell of it rising, because her hands needed something true to do, and then she set the tray down and smoothed the starched cotton of her apron and walked out into the dining room. Into the low murmur of voices, the clink of silver on porcelain, the faint sweetness of melting candle wax, where the most powerful man in the city was waiting to be disappointed. Again, she had served difficult guests, every server had, but she had never served Julian Hale, because in 8 months at the marchand, she had been careful. And the first rule of being careful was to never be the one sent to the corner table. People who went to the corner table were noticed. People who were noticed got remembered, and people who got remembered got asked questions, and Nora had built her whole small life around not being asked questions. He did not look up when she reached him. He was a man somewhere in his middle 30s, with the kind of stillness that money buys and grief sharpens, dark hair, a charcoal suit of wool so fine it seemed to drink the light, no tie, and a wedding ring he was turning slowly on his finger with a faint metallic whisper as though winding a watch that had stopped. The corner table was set for one. The chair across from him was empty, pushed in, perfectly square to the table, and she would think about that empty square chair for a long time afterward. "The fish was wrong," he said, still not looking up. "The fish is always wrong. Take it away." The room was listening. The marchand had 30 covers on a Tuesday, and every one of them had stopped, pretending not to watch. Renner hovered 10 feet back, with the expression of a man calculating how many months of payroll one walkout cost. The correct thing to do, the safe thing, the only thing, was to apologize for the fish and remove it and offer the menu again and back away. Nora looked at the plate. The sea bass had not been touched, its skin still crisp and glistening. The herb butter pooled and gone glassy at the edge. Not a flake of it. The lemon was uncut on the rim, its bright oil untouched, the way it had come out twice before, and the man had not so much as lifted his fork. And something in her, some worn-in place she usually kept under careful guard, came loose. "The fish isn't wrong," she said. The ring stopped turning. "You haven't tasted it," she said quietly. "The way you'd say something to one person in a room full of people you did not want to wake. You haven't tasted any of them. You send them back before the steam's even off. So it isn't the fish, sir. I don't think there's a plate in this kitchen that's going to be the one you're waiting for. And everybody here is too frightened of you to say it, so they keep cooking, and you keep sending it back, and you both get to pretend it's about the fish." Nobody breathed. Renner made a small sound, like a man stepping off a curb that wasn't there. Julian Hale looked up. She had not known what his eyes were going to do. She had expected the cold. What she had not expected was the way the cold cracked, just for a second, like the surface of a pond when something moves underneath it, and then closed over again so fast she could almost believe she had imagined it. "What is your name?" he said. It was not a question. He did not ask questions. She would learn that about him later, that he turned every question into a command, so that he never had to risk wanting the answer. "Nora," she said. "Take the fish away, Nora." A pause. "And bring me whatever you would eat. If you were hungry and somebody else was paying." She took the fish away. The kitchen hit her with its wall of heat and noise, the hiss of the flat top, the smell of browned butter and garlic, and the sharp green bite of parsley just cut, the clatter of a sauté pan finding its hook. In the kitchen, Priya was sitting on an overturned milk crate by the walk-in, white as flour, the cold breath of the open fridge curling out around her ankles, and Margot, the head server who had worked the Marchand floor for 19 years and had seen everything twice, was crouched in front of her with a glass of ginger ale that fizzed faintly in the din. Margot looked up at Nora over the rim of her reading glasses. "You said something to him," Margot said. It was not a question either, but it came from the opposite end of the world, as his. "I could hear the whole room not breathing from in here." "Well," she straightened, knees cracking, and considered Nora with frank curiosity. "That's new." "He asked me to bring him something I'd eat," Nora said. Margot's eyebrows went up a quarter inch, which on Margot was the equivalent of dropping a tray. "He hasn't ordered off menu in 2 years," she said. "He hasn't ordered at all, really. He comes, he sends it back, he leaves. We've been feeding the staff his sea base 3 nights a week since the spring." She tipped her head toward the kitchen. "Go on, then. Don't keep the wonder of the age waiting." Nora brought him the thing she would have eaten. It was not on the menu. It was a bowl of the cook's family meal, the rough, good food the kitchen made for itself at 4 in the afternoon before service, which tonight was a braise of white beans and greens, and a heel of the same bread that went out to the tables, but was somehow always better. At the station, eaten standing up. She had Theo, the youngest cook, plate it properly in a warm, shallow bowl, the steam coming up earthy, and peppered with the smell of softened garlic and good olive oil, and she set it in front of Julian Hale with a spoon and the cold lemon water he hadn't asked for, the glass beading where her fingers had been, because his lips were dry and grief made a person thirsty in a way they never noticed. He looked at the bowl for a long moment. Then he picked up the spoon, cool and heavy in his hand. He ate slowly, the warm earthy braise loosening something in him, and he ate all of it, and he did not look at her again. And when he was done, he set the spoon down at a precise angle and stood and buttoned his jacket and left without a word, and Renner exhaled the breath he had been holding since Tuesday became this, and the dining room remembered how to make noise, and Nora went back to the station and squared a stack of bread plates that did not need squaring, because her hands were shaking, and they needed something true to do. She told herself it was finished. She told herself she would never be sent to that table again, that she had spent 8 months of carefulness in 90 seconds, and that the smart thing, the only thing, was to be invisible again starting tomorrow. She was wrong about that. She was wrong about almost everything that autumn, which was the autumn she stopped being careful, though she did not know it yet, standing at the service station with her hands full of plates that already sat flush, looking at the empty square chair across from the corner table, and wondering what kind of man keeps a place set for someone who is never coming. The penthouse was 40 floors above the restaurant, and it was very clean, and it was very quiet, and Julian Hale ate there exactly never. He came home at 11 and took off his jacket and hung it himself, the wool still cool from the street, because the housekeeper left at 6, and he had stopped wanting people in the apartment after dark. He poured a glass of water he didn't drink, the only sound the small clean tick of ice settling. The air smelled of nothing, of polish and recycled heat, the scentless clean of a place no one cooks in. He walked past the dining room with its long pale table and its 12 chairs, the dark wood catching a thread of city light, and he did not go in, because he had not eaten at that table in 2 years and 3 months, and he had stopped counting the way you stop counting a thing precisely when it has become unbearable to count. There was a reservation he kept. The marchand held the corner table for him every Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday at 8, set for 1, and the staff thought it was arrogance, and the staff were wrong. Claire had loved the corner table. She had loved the restaurant before it was his, had dragged him to it on their second date, when he was still a man who counted the bill, and she had sat in the chair that was now always empty and eaten everything on her plate and half of his, and told him the truth about himself in a low, amused voice that no one had used with him before or since. That was the thing no one understood. People thought he sent the food back because he was exacting. People thought the great Julian Hale, who had turned one failing bistro into a hospitality group worth more than some countries, could not be pleased. The truth was simpler and worse. He sent the food back because if he ate it, he would have to admit he was sitting alone at a table, for 2 eating a meal his wife would never taste, and that the meal was fine, was good, was excellent, and that the world had gone on being delicious without her in it. So he sent it back. He made the fish wrong so that the wrongness was something outside himself, something he could name and reject and leave, and he had been doing it for 2 years, and he had genuinely believed no one had noticed what he was actually rejecting. And then a quiet woman with a tray of bread had looked at him across the dining room and said it out loud. He stood at the window of the penthouse, with the city laid out beneath him like a circuit board. And he turned the ring on his finger, and he thought, against his will, about the bowl of beans and greens. He had eaten it because he had been too stunned to perform the rejection, and it had tasted like the kind of food a person makes when they are not trying to impress anyone, when they only want the person eating it to feel, for the length of one bowl, that someone had thought about whether they were warm. No one had thought about whether he was warm in 2 years and 3 months. And the part that unsettled him, standing there with the cold glass sweating against his palm, was the question he could not put down. What did she want, and how long would it take her to ask for it? He did not sleep well. He almost never did. But he lay awake that night thinking not about Claire, which was the usual shape of his sleeplessness, but about a sentence. Everybody here is too frightened of you to say it. He had built an entire life on being a man no one would say things to. It had taken him 15 years and an enormous amount of money, and a waitress earning the better part of nothing had dismantled it in the time it took to clear a plate and had not even seemed to want anything from him for the trouble. That was the part he could not file away. Everyone wanted something. He had known it since he was 22 and newly rich, and had watched the people around him rearrange their faces. It was the first law of his world, and it had never once failed him. The warmth of a stranger is the opening move of a transaction. He had made peace with it. He had built around it. The woman had cleared his plate and walked away. "Tell me what you would eat," he had said, "if you were hungry and somebody else was paying." He had meant it as a test, the way he tested everyone, a small trap to see whether she would order the most expensive thing on the menu to flatter his wallet, or the cheapest to flatter his humility. She had brought him the food the cooks ate standing up. She had failed the test by refusing to take it, and he had not known what to do with a person who would not be tested, and so he had eaten the beans and gone home and lain awake. 3 days, he told himself. He would go back Thursday, and the spell would break, and she would turn out to want something after all, and the world would right itself, and he could go back to sending the fish away in peace. He went back Thursday. Nora knew he had come the way you know weather is coming, a change in the pressure of the room, before anything visible happens. The hostess stiffened. Renner appeared from his office in a fresh tie. Margot, passing the station with an armful of menus, murmured without breaking stride, "Your gentleman's here, Corner." He asked the host a question. She let a beat fall, enjoying it. He asked which one was Nora. Something cold and familiar moved through Nora's chest. Being asked for by name was the precise opposite of everything she had spent 3 years building. She thought, with a clarity that frightened her, about the last time a powerful man in a restaurant had known her name and what it had cost her, and she had to square the edge of the menu stack twice before her hands would let go of it. "I'm not on his section," she said. "You are now," Renner said, materializing at her elbow, smelling of the cologne he only wore when ownership was on the floor. He was a narrow, anxious man who managed upward with both hands and downward with none, and he had clearly decided that Nora was a tool he had discovered. "Mr. Hale asked for you specifically. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand who that is? That is the man who signs the lease on the building you are standing in. You will take his table. You will be charming, and you will not." His voice dropped to a hiss. "Do whatever it was you did on Tuesday, whatever you said. We do not need you developing opinions. We need him happy. Go." So she went to the corner table for the second time, and the empty chair was still pushed in square, and Julian Hale looked up before she reached him, which he had not done on Tuesday, and she filed that away without meaning to. "Nora," he said. "Mr. Hale." She set down the cold lemon water. He noticed that she had remembered it. She noticed him noticing. "What can I bring you? Tell me what's good tonight." A command. But his eyes were not cold. They were watchful, the eyes of a man who has set a trap and is waiting to be proven right about the world, and Nora had spent enough years among powerful men to recognize the particular loneliness of someone who needs to be proven right, that everyone is out for themselves, because the alternative is to admit how alone he has made himself. "The lamb's good tonight," she said. Theo did the braise, and Theo's careful. "The halibut's good if you want something lighter. The beans aren't on the menu, but I can have him do them again, if you'd rather have something that doesn't ask anything of you." He was quiet for a moment. "Why would I want food that doesn't ask anything of me?" "Because some nights a person doesn't have it in them to be impressed," she said, "and there's no shame in beans." The crack again. That movement under the surface of the pond, there and gone. "The lamb," he said. Since Theo is careful, a pauses she would come to recognize as the sound of him deciding whether to risk something. "Sit down." "I can't sit down, Mr. Hale. I'm working. I own the building." "You own the building," she agreed. "You don't own the way I do my job. If I sit down at your table, I'm not a server anymore. I'm a thing you bought for an hour, and then everything I say to you is something you paid for, and you'll spend the whole meal wondering what I'm angling for, because that's how you look at the room. I've watched you do it. I'd rather stand and mean it." She had no idea where the words came from. She had spent 3 years swallowing words exactly like these, but there was something about him, about the empty square chair, and the ring he turned, and the way grief had hollowed a wealthy man down to a hunger no kitchen could fill, that pulled the truth out of her sideways, the way a splinter comes out, painful and sudden and a relief. Julian Hale set down the wine list he had not been reading. "You think I look at the room like everyone is angling," he said. "I think you've trained yourself too," Nora said. "I think it's kept you safe, and I think it's kept you starving. I'll get your lamb." She got his lamb, the braise fragrant with rosemary and slow-cooked shallot, the meat falling soft and dark against the warm plate. He ate all of it. And when she brought the check, he did not look at it, because men like him never look at the check. But he looked at her, and he said, "You said you've watched me do it. The way I look at the room." He turned the ring once. "How long have you worked here?" 8 months, and in 8 months you never once came to my table until Tuesday. No, sir. Why? And here was the question under the question, and Nora felt the old cold press of self-preservation telling her to lie, to say something easy, to say she was junior, or it wasn't her section. Instead, she heard herself tell him a piece of the truth, which was becoming a dangerous habit around this man. "Because I'm careful," she said. "Because people who get noticed get remembered, and I've had enough of being remembered to last me a lifetime. The corner table's where you get noticed." So I stayed away from it. And then Priya got sick, and there was no one left but me, and I came out here to apologize for the fish like I was supposed to, and instead I told you the truth. And I don't entirely know why, except that you looked so much like a man drowning in plain sight. And nobody in this whole bright, expensive room was going to throw you anything, and I couldn't watch it one more sextant. The marchand hummed around them, glass and silver and low laughter, the warm air carrying butter and roasting garlic, and the green snap of herbs from the open pass. Julian Hale looked at the woman standing beside his table for two, and for the first time in 2 years and 3 months, he was not the loneliest person in the room. He was simply a person in the room. And he did not know yet how much he was going to need her, or what it was going to cost them both, or that the truth she could not stop telling him was the only thing in his enormous purchased life that he was ever going to be unable to buy. "Thank you, Nora," he said, "for the lamb." "Thank you for eating it," she said, and meant it, and went back to the station to square plates that did not need squaring, while the empty square chair across from him sat exactly as it always had, and something in the geometry of it had begun, very quietly, to change. He came back on Saturday, and the Tuesday after, and the Thursday after that, and the corner table stopped being a place of dread and became, without anyone deciding it, hers. It happened in small ways. The kitchen, which had been making his fish wrong on purpose, so it could be sent back without consequence, began making things right, because Nora carried the plates, and Nora would not carry a dishonest plate. Theo started saving him the careful braise. Margot, who measured the worth of management by how little it interfered, began to refer to Julian Hale as "your gentleman," with a dryness that contained, underneath, something that was almost approval. Renner glowed with reflected importance and took credit for the transformation in a memo to the regional office that Margot read aloud in the locker room in a voice of withering enjoyment. And Nora, against every rule she had made for herself, began to look forward to Tuesdays. She did not let herself examine it too closely. Examining things too closely was how you learned what you couldn't have. But she noticed the shape of him filling in. The first week he had been a man-shaped absence in an expensive suit. By the third week he was asking, commanding but asking, about the kitchen, about Theo's braise, about why the bread was better at the station, and listening to the answers as though they mattered, which no one had done for her in a long time. He never spoke about himself. She never asked. They built a strange little country between them, 10 minutes at a time, 3 nights a week, bounded on all sides by the fact that she was standing and he was sitting, and neither of them was allowed to want anything from the other. "You bring me water I didn't order," he said one Thursday, watching her set down the lemon glass. "Your lips get dry," she said. "Grief does that. People never notice they're thirsty." He went still. It was the first time either of them had used the word. "You decided I was grieving," he said. "I didn't decide it. You set a chair for someone and push it in square so no one will sit in it, and you order food you won't eat at a table for 2. And you turn that ring, like you're trying to start an engine that won't catch." She had said too much. She knew it the moment it was out. "I'm sorry, that wasn't mine to say." "No," he said. "It wasn't." He turned the ring. Her name was Claire. It came out of him roughly, like a stone he'd been carrying under his tongue. She loved this table. She loved this restaurant before it was mine. I bought the whole group eventually, but I bought this place first, for her and she. He stopped. His jaw worked. I keep the chair because if I stop keeping the chair, then she's really gone, and I am not, it turns out, the kind of man I always believed I was. I believed I could survive anything. I built a life on the assumption that I could survive anything, and I cannot survive a pushed-in chair. The dining room glittered around them. Nora stood very still beside his table, holding the empty tray against her chest like a shield, and did not say any of the useless things people say. She did not say she was sorry for his loss. She did not say Claire was watching over him. She looked at the chair, and then she looked at him, and she said the true thing, which was the only thing she ever seemed able to say to him. "She isn't in the chair," Nora said. "I don't think she ever was. I think she's in the fact that you bought a whole restaurant because she liked the bread. You don't have to keep the chair empty to keep her. You're carrying her around in everything you do. The chair's just the part that hurts." Julian Hale looked at the empty chair across from him for a long moment. Then he reached out and, very deliberately, pulled it out from the table, the legs whispering against the floor, and turned it a few degrees so that it no longer sat in its rigid square. A small thing. The smallest thing. His hand was not quite steady when he took it back. "Sit," he said. And then, because she had taught him something without either of them noticing, he tried again. "Will you sit? Just for a minute. Not as a thing I bought. As the person who told me the truth when no one else would." He almost smiled, and the almost smile cost him something, and that was how she knew it was real. "Consider it your break." And Nora, who had built her whole small careful life around, never sitting down at the corner table, pulled out the chair the rest of the way, and sat. She sat for a minute that became 5, and the world did not end. He asked her where she was from, and she told him a small true thing, and not the large dangerous one. She asked him nothing which he noticed, and which he found he could not stop thinking about, because everyone asked him things. Everyone wanted the door he kept locked, and the one person he might have opened it for was the one person who never reached for the handle. It became their ritual. Not every night, and never for long, and always with her standing up the moment the floor got busy, because she was a server first and would not pretend otherwise. But 3 nights a week, in the quiet between the early covers and the late ones, the quiet one sat for a few minutes at the corner table for 2, and the chair stopped being a wound and started being a chair. The care traveled the way care travels in a kitchen, which is to say, through food and never through speeches. He came in one Thursday, gone grey and thin around the eyes, the particular grey of a man who has not slept and has been somewhere that cost him, and Nora did not ask where, because she never asked. She went into the kitchen and had Theo make him a soft egg on toast, the food you make for someone who is sick. The bread warm and faintly smelling of butter at the edges, and she brought it without a word, and set it down with the small clink of plate on cloth, and put the cold lemon water beside it, and Julian looked at the egg on toast in the most expensive restaurant he owned, and something in his throat worked. "This is not on the menu," he said. "No," she said. "It's what my gran made me the day of my mother's funeral. It was the only thing I could keep down. You look like a man who can't keep much down tonight." She straightened a fork that was already straight. "It was the anniversary, wasn't it? I'm not asking. I just had Theo turn the egg soft." He ate the egg on toast slowly, all of it, the yolk soft and gold breaking warm over the crisp buttered bread, and he did not say it was the anniversary, because he did not have to, and that was the whole point of the egg. When he was done, he sat for a moment with his hands flat on the cloth, and then he said, in the voice of a man confessing to a crime, "I went to the cemetery. I have not gone in 14 months. I drove out, and I stood at the gate, and I could not make myself go in. So I stood at the gate for an hour, like a delivery man who lost the address, and then I drove back and came here." He turned the ring. "I have never told anyone that. I have a sister who would lie down in traffic for me, and I have never told her I cannot walk through the gate." "You don't have to walk through the gate to have loved her," Nora said. "You drove out. That's the part that counts. The gate's just the part that hurts." She had said a version of it before, about the chair, and they both heard the echo, and it was the first thing that was almost a private language between them. There came to be a private language. That was the dangerous part, the part she did not let herself examine. It started over a bottle of wine he tried to order her to appreciate, a Burgundy with a name like a Sost's stately home and a price like a used car, and Nora had tasted it because he insisted, and pronounced it, after grave consideration, fine, just fine. He had been so personally affronted, so genuinely scandalized, that a person could hold the liquid equivalent of a small inheritance in her mouth and call it fine, that it became a thing between them. He would name some extravagance, a watch, a car, a painting he had been offered, and wait, and she would consider it with enormous seriousness and pronounce it fine, and the first time she got him to laugh in the dining room, really laugh, head back, a sound that turned heads 3 tables away, it was because he had described a yacht, and she had said it sounded fine. Margot, passing with a tray, did not break stride. "First time that man's laughed on my floor in 2 years, she said to the air. And it took a girl insulting a boat. It was her one wry observation of the night, delivered to no one, and it was perfect. But a building like the Marchand does not let 2 people build a private country in the corner without the rest of the world noticing the borders, and the world, when it noticed, was not kind. It happened at a private dinner, the kind the Marchand hosted for people whose names were on buildings. A table of 12, old money and the newer money that wished it were old, and at the head of it a woman named Carrington, who collected restaurants the way she collected husbands, briefly and expensively, and who had decided, the moment she saw Julian Hale pull out a chair for a server, that there was sport to be had. She summoned Nora over for the water, and then held her there, in front of the table of 12, the air thick with perfume, and the heavy sweetness of the lilies in the centerpiece, the murmur dropping to a hush, and looked her up and down with the slow pleasure of a cat who has found something small. "You're the one," Carrington said, loud enough for the table. "The little waitress. We've all heard. Julian Hale, who sent back every plate in the city, tamed by a girl who busses tables." She smiled at her guests. "Tell us, dear, what is the secret? Did you read a book about it? There are books, you know, for girls like you. How to marry above your station. I imagine the chapter on widowers is very well thumbed." The table tittered, the soft, cruel sound of people who will not be the ones humiliated. "Go on. We're all desperate to know your trick. A man like that doesn't notice the help, unless the help is very, very clever about being noticed." The dining room, which always listened. Nora stood with the water pitcher and felt the old cold flood up through her, the precise cold of being made small in front of people with the power to make it stick. And she knew this too. She had been made small in rooms like this her whole life. And the careful thing, the safe thing, was to apologize for nothing and pour the water and retreat. Her hand found the edge of the pitcher's base and squared it against her palm. She did not retreat. But she did not have to find the words either, because a chair scraped at the corner table, and Julian Hale was standing. He did not raise his voice. He never raised his voice. That was the frightening thing about him, the way the most powerful man in the room got quieter the angrier he became, so that a whole room leaned in to hear itself indicted. "Mrs. Carrington," he said. You have been a guest in 4 of my restaurants, and you have never once finished a meal without sending something back to make the room. Watch you do it. I used to think we had that in common. I was wrong. I sent food back because I was grieving and could not say so. You send it back because the only way you can feel large is to make someone smaller. And you have just done it to a member of my staff, in my house, at my table, and I find that I would rather lose your account than your good opinion of her. He let that sit. She has no trick. That is the entire trick. She is the only person who has walked into this building in 2 years and not wanted a single thing from me, and you cannot conceive of such a person, because you have never in your life been one. The water is complimentary. Your dinner is not. Margot will bring your coats. There was a silence so total that Nora could hear the candle burning, the small, wet sound of wax, and the faint hiss of the wick. Carrington opened her mouth and discovered, for perhaps the first time, that there was nothing in it. The table of 12 developed a sudden interest in their bread plates, and Margot, who had appeared at the edge of the room the way she always appeared at the exact moment a thing needed carrying, said, in a voice of warm and withering hospitality, "Coats, of course. This way, if you'd be so kind," and herded the most powerful social table in the city toward the door, like a woman shooing geese off a lawn, and her face as she passed Nora was a study in restraint. And the moment the doors closed, she allowed herself precisely one raised eyebrow, which on Margot was a standing ovation. But it cost something, and Nora knew it the moment the heat of the rescue cooled. She found Julian at the corner table, and she did not thank him, because she was not sure it was a kindness. "You shouldn't have done that," she said quietly. "You just made me the girl the owner defends. You made me a story. They'll talk, and the talk won't say he stood up for a woman who was being cruelly treated. It'll say exactly what she said. That I'm clever about being noticed, and now I've got the owner fighting my battles. You can afford to lose her account. I'm the one who has to be in the room after you've gone home." Julian was quiet for a long moment, and she watched him understand it, watched the cost of his own decency land on someone other than himself for what might have been the first time. "I didn't think of that," he admitted. "I have never had to think of that. I have spent my whole life being the person whose defense ends an argument. It did not occur to me that being defended could be its own kind of exposure." He looked genuinely stricken. "I made it worse by trying to make it better." "You made it human," she said, relenting, because his stricken face was real, and she had never been able to stay angry at a real thing. "Next time, just let me pour the water. I've been made small in fancy rooms before. I know how to stay standing. I don't need rescuing. I need." She stopped, because she had been about to say something true and large, and the large, true things were the ones that cost. She squared the pitcher base against her palm. "I need you to not turn me into a story, that's all. Stories are how people like me get disappeared." He nodded slowly. He did not understand all of it, but he understood that she had handed him something he had got wrong, and that she had done it gently, and that no one corrected Julian Hale gently. They either flattered him or feared him. And here was a third thing, a woman who would tell him he had blundered and stay at the table afterward. He filed it away, the way she filed things away, and neither of them knew yet that the story Carrington carried out the door that night would find its way, eventually, to the one person in the city already primed to believe the worst about a clever girl who got the owner to fight her battles. The trouble, when it came from above, the way trouble in a building like the Marchand always did. Vivienne Hale arrived on a Saturday without a reservation, which was a thing that did not happen, and was given the best table on the floor, which was a thing that happened only for her. She was Julian's older sister by 6 years, and she ran the Hale Foundation, and she had the kind of cool, exact beauty that looked assembled rather than born. Every element chosen, nothing left to chance. She wore grey the way other people wore armor. She had buried her brother's wife beside him at the funeral, one hand flat between his shoulder blades the entire service. And she had decided that day, watching him not weep, that she would spend the rest of her life standing between Julian and anything that might hurt him further, and she had been doing exactly that for 2 years and 3 months, with the relentless competence of a woman who had nothing left to protect but this. She watched her brother across the dining room. She watched him pull a chair out for a waitress. She watched the waitress sit, and she watched Julian's face do something she had not seen it do since before the funeral. And Vivienne Hale set down her wine and went very still, because she had seen people get close to her brother before, and she knew exactly what they were always after. "Let me be clear," Vivienne said when she had Nora alone. She had engineered it with the ease of a woman accustomed to engineering things, a request to see the wine cellar, a quiet word that the waitress who served her brother should be the one to show her. They stood among the racked bottles in the cool underground hum, the air thick, with the smell of cork and damp stone and old wine, sleeping in the dark, the labels furred with a fine dust under Nora's fingertips. And Vivienne Hale looked at Nora the way an appraiser looks at a stone she suspects is glass. "My brother is the most generous man you will ever meet, and the most foolish, because grief has made him soft in exactly the place that used to keep him safe. You have noticed this. Of course you have. You have built your little routine on it. The standing up, the truth-telling, the refusal to ask him for anything. It is very well done. It is, frankly, the most sophisticated approach I have seen. And I have seen them all. The ones who flatter him bore him. The ones who chase him frighten him. But a woman who will not take anything, that he cannot resist, so." She opened her handbag. "I would like to know your number. Not your telephone, your price. Everyone showing my brother that kind of attention has one, and I find it cleaner to settle it early, before he is in too deep to be sensible." Nora looked at the checkbook. She had been here before. Not this cellar, not this woman, but this exact moment. The moment a powerful person decides you are a problem to be priced. The last time it had happened she had been 24, and she had said nothing, and signed nothing, and lost everything anyway. And the silence she had kept that day had become the silence she kept every day since. She did not keep it now. "I'm not the one keeping him in that chair," Nora said quietly. "I'm the one who got him out of it. You can write a number on that check if it makes you feel like you've protected him. But you've been standing between your brother and the whole world for 2 years. And the world isn't what's hurting him. The chair is, and you can't buy the chair away any more than I can. Put the book away, Mrs. Hale. I don't want your brother's money. I'm not entirely sure I'm allowed to want anything else either, so you can sleep easy. But I won't be paid to stop telling him the truth. The last time I let someone pay me to be quiet, I'm still paying for it, and I'm done." She had said too much. She knew it the way she always knew it, a half-second too late. Vivienne's eyes sharpened on that last sentence like a hawk fixing on movement in long grass. "The last time someone paid you to be quiet," Vivienne repeated softly. "How interesting. We'll come back to that." She closed the handbag. She had not capitulated. Nora could see her recalculating, folding this new information into whatever architecture she was building. "I will say this for you. You are either exactly what you appear to be, which would make you the first person in 15 years, or you are very, very good. I intend to find out which." She turned to go and paused at the cellar door, the cool light catching the grey of her. "He pulled out a chair for you. Do you understand that he has not let anyone sit in that chair since we put his wife in the ground? Whatever you are not nothing, That is what frightens me about you." And she went back up the stairs, and Nora stood alone among the bottles with her heart going hard, and squared a row of corked necks that were already in a perfect line because her hands needed something true to do. The thing that revealed Nora's courage, when it came, did not come from the Hales at all. It came from Renna, and from a Tuesday afternoon, and from a stack of envelopes she was never meant to see. The March hand pooled its tips. Every server's gratuities went into a shared pool and were divided by hours worked, and on the first Tuesday of every month, Renna counted the pool in his office and made up the envelopes, and the staff trusted him to do it honestly because the alternative was a kind of low daily despair they could not afford. Nora had come in early to swap a shift, and Renna's office door was ajar, and she saw him at his desk with the cash drawer open and a second set of envelopes. A thin set, his own handwriting, going into his own jacket, and she saw the master sheet where the hours were logged, and she saw, because she had spent 3 years being careful and careful people read documents, that the hours had been shaved. Theo's hours, Priya's, before she had left, the dishwasher's, Margot's, 2 hours here, 3 there, from exactly the people least able to check and least able to complain, skimmed off the top of the pool and rerouted into the thin envelopes in Renna's jacket. She stepped back from the door before he saw her. She stood in the corridor outside his office, and the cold came up through her like floodwater, because she knew this room. She had stood outside a room exactly like this one, 3 years ago, in a restaurant across the city, with a different manager and a different ledger and the same shaved hours. And she had gone in, 24 years old and certain that the truth would matter. And she had told the owner, and the owner had thanked her gravely, and then the owner and the manager had closed, ranks the way money always closes ranks. And within a month, Nora was the one let go. For attitude, for not being a team fit. And the word had gone out along the quiet networks that run beneath the restaurant world, and for a year afterward, no good house in the city would hire the girl who made trouble. She had learned the lesson that the world teaches people who tell the truth without power behind them. She had learned to be quiet. She had built a whole life on the lesson. And now she stood outside another office with the lesson roaring in her ears, and she thought about Theo, who saved braes for a grieving man he had never spoken to, missing 3 hours' wages he had actually worked. She thought about Margot, 19 years on the floor, robbed 2 hours at a time by a man in a fresh tie. She could be quiet. Quiet was safe. Quiet had kept her employed for 3 years. She went to find Julian Hale instead, and that was the moment, though she did not know it, that she stopped being careful for good. She did not go to Renna. She had gone to the manager last time, and the manager had buried her. She did not go to the regional office, faceless and far away. She went to the corner table on Tuesday night, and she stood beside the chair she now sometimes sat in, and she said, "Mr. Hale, I need to tell you something. And after I tell you, you should know it's the kind of thing that's only ever cost me. I'm telling you anyway. The man who runs your restaurant is stealing from the people who can least afford it. And I have looked at exactly how, and I will show you, and you can do whatever you do with it, but I couldn't carry it and keep being able to look at Theo." Julian set down his fork, the watchfulness in his eyes, the readiness always to be proven right that everyone wanted something, turned, for once, outward toward a target that was not her. "Tell me," he said, but it was different this time. It was not the command he used to keep from wanting an answer. It was a man asking to be shown a wound so he could tend it. She told him. She showed him, the next afternoon, the master sheet and the shaved hours and the pattern that anyone careful could read. And Julian Hale, who had built a hospitality empire on knowing exactly how a restaurant breathes, read it in 90 seconds and went a color she had not seen on him before. a still white anger that had nothing to do with grief. "You understand what this could do to you," he said quietly, not looking up from the sheet. "If I act on this, Renner will say you have a grudge. He will say you wanted his job, that you got close to me to get him removed. People will say you are exactly the kind of woman who gets close to a man like me to move pieces around a board." Vivienne will say it loudest of all. He looked up. "You knew all that, and you came to me anyway." "I came to you anyway," Nora said. Theo worked those hours. Something moved in Julian Hale's face, deep down, the way the pond moves. "No one has ever brought me a problem that wasn't also a request," he said slowly. "In 15 years, every truth anyone has ever told me had a handout behind it. And you walked up to my table and handed me a thing that can only hurt you. For a cook's 3 hours. He set the sheet down very gently, as if it were fragile. "I don't know what to do with you, Nora. I genuinely do not." "You don't have to do anything with me," she said. "Do something about Renner." He did something about Renner. It was quiet, and it was complete, and it was finished within a week. An internal audit, a quiet review of 3 years of pool sheets that confirmed everything and more, a severance of employment with the kind of legal finality that money makes possible, and a back payment from Julian's own account and not the company's, to every member of staff who had been shaved, going back as far as the records ran. Theo got an envelope that made him sit down on a milk crate. Margot got hers and read the amount, and took off her reading glasses and pressed the heels of her hands to her eyes for a moment, and then put the glasses back on and said to no one, 19 years, and a beans and greens girl is the one who finally counts the till. But she was almost smiling when she said it, and that night she brought Nora a cup of the good tea from the manager's now empty office. The steam curling up sweet and bergamot sharp, and set it down with a soft clink and said, "That took a spine, especially yours. I know what it costs you to make noise. I've watched you not do it for 8 months. She let that land. "Well, it's done now. Drink your tea." Nora drank her tea, the heat of it spreading warm through her chest. And for the first time in 3 years, telling the truth had not cost her everything. It had cost her nothing. It had, impossibly, given something back. She did not entirely know what to do with a world that worked that way. She had built her carefulness on a different physics. She did not know that the bill for it had only been deferred, and that it was coming, and that it would arrive dressed as the truth, the way the worst things always do. It was Margot, in the end, who made her say the large, dangerous thing out loud, on a slow Thursday, with the rain coming sideways against the front windows, and only 4 covers on the floor. "You went to the cellar with Vivienne Hale and came back square-jawed," Margot said, refilling the sugar caddies with the unhurried precision of a woman who had refilled 10,000 sugar caddies. "And then you took down a thief who outranked you. For a person who spent 8 months trying to be wallpaper, you've had a loud autumn." She slotted a caddy into place. "That last restaurant. The one nobody asks you about, because you go grey when it comes up. That's where you learn to be wallpaper, isn't it?" Nora wiped a glass that was already clean, the dry cloth squeaking faintly on the rim. The rain ran down the window in long grey ropes, and drummed soft against the glass. Outside, the city was going home under umbrellas, the wet street hissing under tires, and inside it was warm and smelled of bread and rain on wool, and the honeyed candle wax Margot refused to switch to the cheaper kind. And because Margot had earned it, and because the autumn had loosened something in her she could no longer fully close, Nora told her. "I reported a manager for stealing hours," she said, 3 years ago. Like Renner, almost exactly like Renner. I was 24 and I thought the truth would protect me. The owner thanked me, and then they fired me for attitude and put the word out, and for a year I couldn't get hired anywhere that mattered. I waited tables at a chain by the airport. I told myself the lesson was that the truth costs you everything when you're nobody, and the only safe move is to be quiet and small and never get remembered. And I've been quiet and small ever since, until your gentleman sent his fish back one too many times, and I just couldn't. She set down the glass, squared it against the edge of the bar, and now I've done it again. Told the truth to a powerful man about a powerful man. And it worked this time, and I don't trust it. I keep waiting for the bill. Margot was quiet for a moment. The rain, the candles. Here's a thing I know after 19 years, she said finally. The bill always comes, you're right about that. But you've got the cause and effect, backward. Love. The bill doesn't come because you told the truth. It comes because the world hates being seen clearly, and somebody always tries to make you pay for the seeing. She picked up her caddies. Doesn't mean you stop. Means you pick the people you do it next to. She glanced toward the corner table, where the place was set for two and the chair was no longer square. I think you picked all right, for once. And she carried the sugar away, leaving Nora with the rain and the clean glass and a small, dangerous, unfamiliar feeling that she eventually, reluctantly, identified as hope. That was the trouble with hope. It made the falling so much further. She saw the other side of Vivian Hale by accident, the way you see most true things. It was late on a Sunday, the restaurant dark and closed, and Nora had come back for a coat she had left, and she let herself in the service door and crossed the empty kitchen and stopped because there was a light on in the private dining room at the back, the small one the marchand kept for parties of 8, the one with the door that was almost always shut. The door was ajar, and through the gap Nora saw Vivian Hale, alone, in a plain dark sweater instead of her armor of grey, standing over the small marble side table. On the table there was a framed photograph. Nora could not see the face in it from where she stood, but she did not need to. There were white flowers, fresh, their cool, faint sweetness reaching her even at the door, arranged with the care of someone who had done it many times. There was a single place setting laid out, old. The silver, heavy and good, the kind of setting that belonged to a person and not a restaurant, and Vivienne stood over it with her fingers resting on the edge of the silver frame. And her thumb moved across the glass, slowly, back and forth, the way you rub at a mark that will not come off except there was no mark, and Nora understood that she was not cleaning the glass. She was touching the only part of someone she had left to touch. Vivienne did not weep. She stood in the lamplight, straight-backed, in her plain sweater, with her thumb moving on the glass, and she looked, for the length of a held breath, exactly like her brother. Like a person carrying a chair they could not put down. Nora had spent weeks thinking of Vivienne Hale as a wall between Julian and the world. She had not once considered that the wall might be grieving too. That Vivienne had set this table in the back room of her late sister-in-law's favorite restaurant and come, alone, on the one night no one would see, to keep her company. Nora stepped back from the door. She did not announce herself. She left the coat. She went out the way she had come, into the raw cold of the Sunday street, the wind sharp and metallic on her face, and she carried the picture of Vivienne's thumb on the glass home with her. And she did not tell anyone, because some things you witness are not yours to spend, she thought, walking home. She is not my enemy. She is just guarding a grave. And she was right, and she was also about to learn how much damage a person can do while guarding a grave with the best intentions in the world. But before the falling, there was the glimpse. There is always the glimpse. The cruelty of it is that you only recognize it afterward, looking back, the way you recognize the last warm day of the year only once the cold has come. It was a Tuesday in late November, and there was a snow that didn't stick. And the marchand closed early, because the city had emptied out ahead of the weather, and somehow it was just the two of them, Nora and Julian in the warm, bright, empty room after Margot had gone, the only sound the soft tick of cooling radiators, with one candle still lit on the corner table, its wax smell sweet and close, and Theo's last brace of the night going to waste in the kitchen. Julian had stayed past his meal. He had been doing that lately. And Nora, who should have gone home, had let Theo plate the braise for two, and had brought it to the corner table and had sat down across from him without being asked, in the chair that had been Claire's, which neither of them said, because by then they did not need to say the careful things anymore. "I have to tell you something," Julian said, "and I want it on the record that I am about to make a joke, because you once told me I look like a man who has never made one, and I have been thinking about that for 6 weeks like a personal insult." "You have not." "I have. I have drafted several. I discarded them all as beneath the occasion." He turned the ring, but absently now, the gesture worn down to a habit instead of a wound. "Here it is. Are you ready? The first time you brought me the cook's beans, I went home and tried to have my private chef recreate them. A man with 3 Michelin stars. I described the bowl in detail. He produced something exquisite. It cost, I would estimate, $400 in ingredients and an afternoon of his life. And it was perfect, and I could not eat it, because it was missing the only thing that had ever made the beans worth eating." He looked at her across the candle, which was that someone had thought about whether I was warm. Nora put down her spoon with a small clink against the bowl. The snow ticked dry and faint against the dark, cold glass of the windows. "That's not a joke," she said softly. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. It has a punchline. I fired the chef." A pause, and then the corner of his mouth went up, and the almost smile finally arrived all the way. The first true smile she had ever seen on him, and it changed his whole face, made him younger, made him a man instead of a monument. "I'm joking. I gave him a raise. But for one terrible afternoon I genuinely considered it, and I want credit for the restraint." And Nora laughed. Really laughed the way she had not laughed in 3 careful years, the sound surprising her, bright in the empty restaurant. And Julian Hale watched her laugh as though he had just discovered fire, and reached across the small table and put his hand over hers where it rested on the cloth, and neither of them moved it. "Next year," he said, "when there's a real snow, the kind that closes the roads. I want to be snowed in somewhere with a bad kitchen, and you telling me what's wrong with my life. I have decided this is what I want. I have not wanted anything specific in 2 years, and I find I want that very precisely, with an address and a date." It was a future tense, spoken without flinching, and it hung in the warm air between them like something they could both see. "Tell me you'll be there." "I'll be there," Nora said. And for 1 candlelit hour, in an empty restaurant with the snow coming down that didn't stick, 2 people who had each built a life around, not wanting anything, sat at a table for 2 and let themselves have it, and it was the last entirely good night either of them would have for a while. And they did not know it, which was the mercy and the cruelty both. The bill came 11 days later, and it came as Margot had promised, dressed as the truth. Vivienne had not forgotten the sentence. "The last time I let someone pay me to be quiet, I'm still paying for it." She was a thorough woman, and she loved her brother more than she had ever loved her own comfort. And she had spent the weeks since the cellar doing what she did best, which was finding out. She found the restaurant across the city. She found the manager Nora had reported, who was happy to talk, because guilty men are always happy to talk, if you let them tell the story their way. She found the owner who had let Nora go, and she assembled, with care, a version of events, a true-sounding version, built entirely of real facts arranged to lie, in which Nora Bishop was a young woman who had a documented pattern of getting close to powerful men in restaurants, accusing the management of theft, and watching those managers be removed. First the man across the city, now Renner. The dates were real. The firings were real. The pattern, laid out on paper in Vivienne's even hand, looked exactly like what she most feared. A woman who had found a method and was 3 weeks into running it on her brother. She did not do it to be cruel. That was the thing Nora would understand later and could not bear in the moment. Vivienne did it because she had stood over a photograph with her thumb on the glass, and she could not survive watching her brother be destroyed a second time. And she had convinced herself, with the terrible logic of love and grief, that she was saving him. She brought it to Julian on a Thursday afternoon in his office above the restaurant. And she laid the pages on his desk, and she said, "Let me be clear. I take no pleasure in this. But you have let her sit in Claire's chair, and you are about to do something irreversible, and you will not forgive me if I let you do it blind. Read it, all of it, and then tell me I'm wrong." He read it. All of it. And here is the thing about a man who has built his entire life on a single belief: that everyone who shows him warmth is running a transaction. When the belief is finally apparently confirmed, he does not feel betrayed. He feels relieved. Relieved in the most desolate way, because the relief proves the belief. And the belief is the floor he has stood on for 15 years, and it would have been so much more frightening to discover the floor was never there. Julian Hale read the pages his sister had assembled, and the warm thing that had been growing in his chest since a quiet woman told him. His fish wasn't wrong, went cold and quiet and certain, and he thought, with the awful calm of a man returning to solid ground, of course. Maybe she had only ever been performing honesty. Maybe the truth-telling, the one thing he could not buy, the one thing that had cracked him open, had been the most expensive purchase of all, the longest and most patient con, and he had paid for it not with money, but with the chair, with Claire's chair, which he had pulled out of its square and offered to a stranger, because she would not flatter him. And the not flattering had been the flattery, and he had fallen for it, like the softened fool. His sister said grief had made him. He sent for her, not to the corner table, to the office, and Nora climbed the stairs she had never climbed. The carpet hushing every step, the air up there cool and still, and smelling of paper and furniture polish instead of food, and saw the pages on the desk, and saw his face, and knew before he said a word that the bill had come. "I gave Theo back his 3 hours," Julian said. His voice was perfectly level, which was worse than shouting. "And I removed the man who took them. And it did not occur to me to ask why a woman so practiced at finding theft and reporting it to the owner had ended up bussing tables at the bottom of my building. It did not occur to me that I might be the owner this time." He turned a page on the desk without looking at it. "You did the same thing 3 years ago, to another man, in another restaurant. You found the books and you took it to the top, and the manager was removed, and you were positioned as the one honest person in the building. There is a word for a person who runs the same operation twice." "That's not what happened," Nora said. Her voice came out small. The cold was up to her chest. She knew this room. She had always known this room. She had spent 3 years staying out of this exact room, and she had walked into it anyway for him. "Julian, that's not. They fired me. I was the one who lost everything." "You have it backwards. Somebody arranged those facts too. Tell me you didn't report a manager for theft 3 years ago." "I did, but..." "Tell me you didn't get close to me before you reported Renner." That's not the order it." "Then I don't think I have it backwards," he said, and the quiet of it was the quietest she had ever heard a room be. He was not cruel. He did not raise his voice. He simply closed, the way the pond closes over the thing that moved, smooth and final, and the man who had reached across a candle 11 days ago and asked her to be snowed in with him next year looked at her now like a stranger looks at a stain. "I think you are very, very good," My sister said so the day she met you. I should have listened to her. I usually do." He squared the pages against the edge of the desk, and the gesture. Her gesture, the thing her own hands did when they needed something true to hold, went through Nora like a blade. "You can finish out the week if you need the wages. You won't be on my section." "Thank you, Nora. For the lamb." She did not finish out the week. She could not have walked back onto that floor if her life had hung on it. And in a way it did, because she had nothing saved and rent was due. And the word, she knew, the word would go out again, the way the word always went out, the girl who gets close to owners and accuses the management. And this time, the man putting the word out owned half the good houses in the city. She had told the truth to a powerful man about a powerful man. And it had worked once, and she had let herself believe the physics had changed. They had not changed. She walked home in the cold, with her coat she had finally retrieved. The collar damp against the back of her neck, the air sharp with wet pavement and the iron smell that comes before snow, the flakes melting cold on her cheeks the instant they touched, and the snow came down and didn't stick, and her own footsteps were the only sound on the empty wet street, and she thought the thought she had spent 3 years arranging her whole life to never think again. Maybe telling the truth really did cost everything, every time, and the only people who got to be honest were the ones who already had the power survive being heard. She had let herself forget she was nobody. She had let a candle and a future tense make her forget, and the forgetting was the most expensive thing she had ever done. She did not eat that night. She sat in her small clean room and squared the few objects she owned against the edges of the few surfaces she had. Over and over, because her hands needed something true to do, and there was nothing true left anywhere else. What she could not have known, squaring a teacup against the edge of a shelf at midnight, was that the one person who had built the case against her was already beginning to come apart over it. Julian Hale did not eat either. He went back to the penthouse and walked past the long pale table with its 12 chairs, and he poured a glass of water he didn't drink, and he stood at the window over the city, and he was, he realized, exactly where he had been 2 years and 3 months ago, and 1 autumn ago, and he had only been pretending otherwise. He had the floor back. The belief was confirmed. Everyone wanted something. He was safe again, sealed again, alone again, and the relief had curdled within an hour into something he had no name for. And he stood at the glass turning the ring and could not, for the life of him, understand why being right felt exactly like grief. It was Vivienne who broke first, which surprised everyone, including Vivienne. She had won. She had protected her brother. She had watched the waitress climb down the stairs and not come back, and she had felt the grim satisfaction of a job done for almost a full day. And then a question she had not let herself ask began to surface and would not go back down. What if every fact in her file had been true and every conclusion a lie? And then she had gone, on the Sunday, to the private room at the back of the Marchand to set the table and tend the white flowers, and keep Claire company the way she did when no one would see. And she had stood over the photograph with her thumb on the glass, and she had heard, in her own head, in Claire's low, amused voice that she had loved and lost, the thing Claire would have said about all of this. Because Claire had told the truth too. That was what Julian had loved in her. Claire had been the only person in 15 years who told Julian Hale the truth without wanting anything, and the whole family had been suspicious of her for exactly 1 season before she won them. And Vivienne, standing over her photograph, understood with a slow horror what she had done. She had taken the one woman who reminded Julian of his wife, the one woman who told him the truth without a handout, and she had destroyed her with a stack of true facts arranged to lie, the same weapon the world used on every honest person without power. She had become the manager across the city. She had become the closing ranks. So Vivienne Hale did the thing she did best, one more time. She found out the rest. She went back across the city, and this time she did not let the guilty man tell it his way. She found the other servers from 3 years ago, the ones who had been there, the ones nobody asked. She found a dishwasher who still had a phone full of photographs of a ledger. She found the truth, the actual truth, which was that a 24-year-old Nora Bishop had reported a real theft and been destroyed for it by men who closed ranks, and that every fact in Vivienne's careful file had been real, and every conclusion had been a lie, and that she, Vivienne, had done to Nora precisely what had been done to her, and had handed it to her brother as a gift. She brought it to Julian on a Sunday night, in a private room, over Claire's photograph, because she wanted the one witness who would have understood to be present for it. "Let me be clear," Vivienne said, and her voice was not steady, which Nora would not see but Julian would never forget, because Vivienne Hale's voice was never not steady. "I was wrong, not mistaken, wrong. I built that file to be true and false at the same time, the ways teach you to, and I gave it to you because I would rather you hated her than risk you being hurt. And I told myself that was love." She set a second file on the marble beside the white flowers. "This is the rest of it. The part I didn't go looking for the first time, because I didn't want to find it." She told the truth 3 years ago, and they buried her for it, exactly the way I just buried her for it. She is the realest thing that has walked into your life since Claire, and I could not stand it, because if she is real, then everyone is not after something. And if everyone is not after something, then the wall I have made of myself for 2 years has no reason to exist, and I do not know who I am if I am not the wall. Her hand went to the silver frame, her thumb to the glass. "Claire would be ashamed of me." She told you the truth, and we doubted her for a season, too. I remember being the one who doubted her. I have apparently learned nothing in 20 years, except how to do the wrong thing more thoroughly. She stepped back from the table. "I'm resigning the gate, Julian. I have been deciding who is allowed near you since the funeral, and it was never my decision to make, and it has cost you the best thing to happen to you since we lost her. Read the file, and then go and do something irreversible, for once, in the right direction." And she left him alone in the small bright room with the white flowers and the photograph and 2 files, one true and false and one simply true, and Julian Hale read the second one, all of it. The dishwasher's photographs and the buried statements, and the year a young woman spent waiting, tables by the airport for telling the truth, and he sat down, slowly, in one of the chairs of the party of 8, and put his face in his hands, alone where no one could see, the way his sister grieved and the way he never had and stayed like that for a long time. Then he got up, and he did the irreversible thing in the right direction, the only way a man like him could. At a cost, in public, on the record, he did not call her. He had not earned a phone call. He found out where she was working, a chain by a different airport, because the word had already gone out, and the good houses had already closed exactly as she had known they would. And he did not go there, because turning up in his charcoal suit to a place like that would make her smaller. And he had made her small enough. Instead, he did the thing that cost him. He convened, in the Marchand's private room, the people who ran the good houses of the city, the owners and the group directors, and the ones who passed the quiet word along the networks beneath the restaurant world, the same networks that had blacklisted a 24-year-old for honesty. He had the power to fill that room. That was the one thing being Julian Hale was good for, and he stood at the head of the table where his wife's photograph still sat, and he told them the truth about himself, which no one had ever heard him do. 3 years ago, a young woman named Nora Bishop reported a theft. correctly, and this industry destroyed her for it, he said. Some of you helped. I know which of you, because my sister is thorough. More recently, she reported a theft in my own house. Correctly, at great risk to herself, expecting it to cost her everything again, and she did it anyway, for a cook's wages she would never see. He let that settle on the room before he went on. And I believed a lie about her, because believing the lie let me keep a wall I had grown comfortable behind. I am telling you this against my own interest. It would be cleaner for me to let her stay buried. But she told the truth in rooms where the truth had only ever cost her, and the least I can do, with everything I have spent 15 years accumulating, is make sure that the next room she walks into has already heard it from me first. Anyone in this city who would do me a kindness will give Nora Bishop a fair hearing and forget every word that was ever passed about her, including the words I am ashamed to have nearly added. That is the favor I am asking. It is the only one I intend to ask any of you again. It cost him. A man like Julian Hale does not stand in a room of his peers and confess to having been a fool, to having believed a lie, to having let his sister run his life and his grief run his judgment, without it costing him something that does not come back. He spent capital that afternoon that he would never recover, the invisible capital of seeming invulnerable, and he spent it on a woman who was not in the room and might never speak to him again. He did it anyway. It was, Margot said later, when the story made its way down to the floor where stories actually live, the first genuinely expensive thing she had ever seen a rich man do. And then, only then, having put it right at his own cost and not hers, he went to find her. She was at the chain by the airport, in a polyester apron and the wrong shade of maroon that smelled of fryer oil and floor cleaner, the laminated menus tacky under her thumb, carrying a tray of waters to a family of 5 over the squeak of her own soles on the wet-mopped tile, and she saw him in the doorway in his charcoal suit, hopelessly out of place under the buzzing fluorescent light, and her whole body went still the way it did when the pressure of a room changed. She set the waters down. She finished the table, because she was a server first and would not pretend otherwise, and he waited, which she noticed, and filed away. Then she walked over to him, and she did not invite him to sit, because there was nowhere to sit, and nothing to buy, and nothing here was his. "You shouldn't have come," she said. "You'll make them remember me." "I have spent the afternoon making the entire city remember you," he said. "Correctly this time. You can work anywhere you want by tomorrow morning. Not because of me, because of you finally told straight." I only stopped lying about it. He did not reach for her. He had learned that much. He stood with his hands at his sides, a man who had given up the wall and did not yet know how to stand without it. "I believed a lie because it let me stay safe. You told me once I had trained myself to look at the room like everyone was angling, and that it kept me safe and kept me starving, and you were right, and the first time it mattered. The first time being right would have cost me something. I chose safe. I chose starving. I am not asking you to forgive that. I am asking you to let me say out loud, in a terrible restaurant under terrible lights, that you were the realest thing that ever walked into my life, and I treated you like a stain, because being loved by someone honest was more frightening than being alone, and I am done being that man. I sold the wall this afternoon. I can't get it back. I don't want it back." The fluorescent lights hummed. The family of 5 was watching. A manager in a worse tie than Renner's hovered. "You squared the pages," Nora said. Her voice was not steady. "On your desk, when you sent me away, you did the thing I do with my hands. And I thought, even while you were destroying me, I thought, there he is. And I didn't even get to tell him I taught him that." She pressed her lips together. "I don't trust it, Julian. The last man who told me he believed me thanked me and fired me. I have built my whole life on not trusting it." "I know," he said. So don't trust it. Test it. Tell me a true thing right now. The truest worst thing you can think of, and watch me not leave." He almost smiled, and the almost cost him, and that was how she knew. "I have it on excellent authority that I look like a man who needs to be told the truth and can't be trusted to enjoy it. I'd like to spend a great deal of time proving the second half wrong." And Nora Bishop, who had been careful for 3 years, and quiet for longer, and small for longer than that, looked at the man standing under the wrong lights in the right suit. And she told him a true thing, and watched him not leave, and felt the physics of the world shift 1 degree on its axis. Not all the way, not yet, but 1 degree, which is all you ever get at first, and is enough. The snows that closed the roads came in February, and it found them where he had asked to be found. Not at the Marchand, but at a shabby inn 3 hours north, with a famously bad kitchen, where Julian Hale had booked the whole place for a week, and then sent the staff home, because he had wanted a bad kitchen and Nora telling him what was wrong with his life. And he was a man who, once he finally wanted a specific thing, arranged for it with an address and a date. She cooked the beans, the kitchen filling with the smell of garlic, gone soft and gold in the pan, the wood stove ticking with heat. He chopped what she told him to chop, badly, the dull thud of his uneven work sounding on the scarred board, and she told him so, and he laughed, which he did easily now, the wall gone, and the laugh underneath it turning out to have been there the whole time. Outside, the snow came down and stuck, and closed the roads, the world gone soft and muffled and white past the frosted windows, they only smell the wood smoke, and the beans, and the cold, clean air leaking under the door, and they were snowed in exactly as ordered, and at some point in the white quiet, she told him she had been afraid. The whole time at the airport restaurant, that he would change his mind, and he told her the truth back, which was that he had stood in the doorway, terrified she would not finish the table and come over, and she said of course she finished the table. She was a server first, and he said he knew that was the moment he had loved her, watching her set down a tray of waters for a family of 5 before she would let herself be saved. Vivienne came up for the last 2 days when the roads opened. It was Nora who invited her, which Julian did not expect, and Vivienne did not deserve, and both of them knew it. Vivienne brought, instead of a checkbook, a recipe card in faded ink, Claire's hand, the bread that was better at the station, the actual recipe, which Claire had wheedled out of a baker on their honeymoon, and which the Marchand had been making for 9 years, without anyone knowing whose it was. "She would have wanted you to have it," Vivienne said, and set it on the kitchen table of the bad inn, and her thumb did not quite touch the card, and Nora picked it up, the card soft and furred at the creases under her thumb, the ink gone brown with age, and read it, the whole thing, out loud, in the warm kitchens with the bread already proofing yeasty on the counter, and the snow ticking against the windows, and that was the apology, fully delivered and fully received, in the only currency that had ever mattered to any of them, which was the truth handed over at a cost. They opened a place of their own, eventually. Not large. Nora would not run a large house. She had seen what large houses did to people without power. It had a pooled tip system, she counted herself, in the open, on the 1st of every month, and a family meal at 4 o'clock that the staff ate standing up, and a small corner table that was always on principle, set for 2, and never, on principle, held empty for anyone. Theo ran the kitchen. Margot, who had retired from the Marchand on a Friday and grown bored by the following Tuesday, ran the floor and told the new servers, in a voice of withering enjoyment, the story of how it had all started. How the great Julian Hale had sent his fish back 1 too many times, and the quietest girl in the building, the one who had spent 8 months trying to be wallpaper, had walked up to the corner table and said, the thing nobody else, in the whole bright, expensive room had dared to say, and at that corner table, set for two and filled, on a Tuesday with the lamp lit warm and gold, and the bread on the board still steaming, its crust crackling faintly as it cooled, a man who had once been unable to be served sat across from the woman who had told him the truth when no one else would, and he did not turn the ring on his finger, because his hands were busy holding hers. And when she asked him, teasing, dry, in a register she had learned from Margot, whether the food was wrong tonight, he tasted it first all the way and told her the truth. "It's perfect," Julian said, the taste of it warm and good on his tongue. Someone thought about whether I was warm.